Okay, week 3 recap. In full disclosure, it's several days after the end of week 3, but one main thing that happened in week 3 I wanted to tell you about. There was a day I kind of like, alright, I'll just say what happened. I started dealing tournaments. It wasn't for long. They needed me in cash. I dealt cash. Eventually, I got replaced in the lineup, and the floor said you're out, and that was it. And it wasn't, you know, very specific, and I took that to mean you're out of the cash game lineup, but like feel free to see if the tournament floor needs you. Because the first few times I dealt cash, that is what they said. They said, all right, you're out. We don't need you over here, but before you go, check to see if the tournament floor needs another dealer. And I did that, and the tournament floor did, and then I kept dealing tournaments. So he just said, you're out. I went over to a tournament floor, asked if he needed a dealer. He said, yeah. I dealt. The tournament, the cash game floor, who said you're out, saw me about to push into a table on the tournament side and asked me like what I was doing, and I told him. And he didn't seem thrilled that I was like still on the clock, and asked the other side of the room if the other side needed a dealer. What was interesting, okay, a few interesting things about that. For one, the cash game floor in that first week actually said the opposite. Like I said, they said go over there and ask them if they need you. Also, it seems strange to like be so against overtime. Okay, there's cash game overtime, there's tournament overtime. In cash game, like say you have a dealer who's not close to overtime hours for the day or for the week, and you have a dealer who is. If this second dealer who's better keeps working, that dealer is going to be on overtime hours for the day or for the week. Like on the cash game side, it's fairly easy to quantify, like, is it worth it? Because say you're going to have this dealer deal an overtime hour, the better dealer in overtime deal one more hour, versus the worst dealer not in overtime deal one more hour. Okay, the overtime dealer is going to get his the overtime wage. It's like $5.80 more than the regular wage. You're not paying cash game dealers anything else, they're just making their tips, so that's it. You're paying an extra $5.80. But a better dealer can get so many more hands in. I've counted, you know I've counted how many hands we see. I don't know so much in games that are not no limit hold'em, but I've counted a lot of times in no limit hold'em. Sure, you see fewer hands in Omaha just because it takes, you know, you got to deal everyone 4 cards, and I mean limit hold'em should be faster because the decisions are just so fast. No one ever has to think about the amount. Probably see more hands in limit hold'em than no limit hold'em, but probably see fewer hands in Omaha 8 than you do in no limit hold'em. Anyway, I'll talk about no limit because that's what I know. It is so easy for a good dealer compared to like an average dealer or a bad dealer to get like 5-10 more hands in an hour. Some of the worst half hours I've counted in my life, like I counted 9 hands. Some really bad dealers only got 9 hands out in 30 minutes, and some really good dealers have gotten 22 hands. I think that's the most I could remember counting. Like, those are extremes, but I'm saying it's not like uncommon for a good dealer versus a poor dealer to have a difference of like 6, 7, 8 hands over the course of an hour. You know how much more rake a room is going to make if players are seeing 7 more hands? I mean, not every hand is going to be max rake, but say a better dealer versus a worse dealer is going to get 7 more hands in an hour. Say 3 of those hands are no rake. Raise pre, everyone takes it. Raise pre, the pre-flop raiser takes it. And then 2 hands are small pots, $2 each. And then 2 hands are max rake. That's $14. Like, so the better dealer was paid $5.80 more, but brought in $14 more in rake for the room. Seems like an amazing investment to have better dealers dealing on overtime as opposed to weak dealers dealing on regular time. In tournaments, it's much more difficult to quantify. You know, people pay the rake up front. You could still think about it, you know, imagine like, all right, you have someone on overtime and you could have that person deal, or someone not on overtime and have that person deal, and say like whichever dealer you pick is going to deal until the table breaks. Well, the better dealer is going to have fewer mistakes, fewer times the dealer needs to call the floor, more hands, just meaning more all-ins, more chances at players busting, and the table, in theory, will break faster. So would you rather have, you know, a fast, efficient dealer deal for like 1 hour until this table breaks, even if that 1 hour is overtime pay? Or would you rather have a bad dealer who's slow and mistake prone take a very long time to get out enough hands for there to be enough all-ins to break the table? Maybe that slow dealer is going to take 3 hours of dealing to accomplish that. Would you rather have the fast dealer deal 1 hour on overtime pay, or the slow dealer deal 3 hours on regular pay? The room would spend less money having the faster dealer deal 1 hour. Now that's an example I just made up to prove my point, but it does happen that way in theory. So it seems odd that lately they are like very much like cracking down on overtime hours within the day. At least they're still letting people come in all 7 days if they want. So of course over the course of a week they know there's going to be overtime, but within a day they seem very strict about it lately. But just seems weird, especially on the cash side. But what was interesting, so I dealt another down and then I got sent home from the tournament that day. The next day I was dealing cash, and a different floor was very specific. When I was done dealing cash, a different cash game floor said, "You're out, clock out and go home." Very clear this time. Then like a week after that, 5-6 days after that, that original cash game floor was kind of vague again. He said, "I'm booting you out." Again, like, I don't know. I feel like I could have interpreted that as saying like, okay, not needed on the cash side, go check with the tournament. But because it was the same guy, I just clocked out and went home. I was getting pretty close to 8 hours on the day, and I just clocked out and went home that day. But there was a day where there were a lot of all-ins in the tournament, and they didn't need tournament dealers anymore, but I think there are like 3 of us who are like first dealing tournaments, but are dealing cash also. And the guy who runs the room said, "I need cash dealers." And my table had just broken. So I was standing right there, so I went to deal cash. It was taking him a few minutes to tell me what cash game, what table to go to. So I was just standing there near the cash podium, and the guy who runs the room walked over again, and he said, "You know, thanks for being willing to deal both." And I said, "Yeah, definitely." And he said something about hours. He said like, you know, like, I forgot what he said word for word, but like what he said is actually why I do both. It's to stay on the clock. I will show you at the end of the year, I make more dealing tournaments. Pre-tax, it's not debatable. I make more dealing tournaments. After tax with the tip compliance, it gets less clear cut. But cash games are much more difficult, and I'm not making as much money. I do it every time they ask because it keeps me on the clock. If I said I didn't want to deal cash, I could stay on the tournament side at least for a little bit, but then I would be in this random pool. I would be in this pool of dealers, and a few would randomly get selected to go home. I don't want that to happen. So when they ask me, "Do you want to deal cash?" I say yeah every time, because I know I'll stay on the clock doing something and get, you know, very close to 8 hours.
Yeah, I got it at the stadium in May.